Hello and welcome to this Chamber Hustings for two constituencies for the Connetables of Grouville and St Helier, who are in front of us. That we have Sarah Howard, who is one of the candidates for Grouville, alongside Mark Labby, who couldn't make this today. And then we have Simon Crowcroft, who is joining us today, who is his opposite number, his other candidate there, and I'm just looking for the name of that, is Mark Le Chevalier. Who couldn't make this husting either, but rather than not have it, we are having it, and we're having it with the Connetable elects possible of St Helier and Grouville, obviously allowing for the fact there are other candidates who couldn't make it. So welcome both to Sarah Howard and to Simon Crowcroft. Simon, experienced in being in politics for some time. Sarah, your first time there. Welcome. Good to have you with us today. On behalf of the members of the Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'll start with a little 2-minute précis of you and your manifesto, and we'll start with you first, Sarah. So over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, I'm Sarah Howard, standing as Connetable for Grouville. My decision to stand came from 3 years' work in the Grouville community, invigorating historic democratic processes through parish assemblies. The most recent successful requête contributing to amendments to the Island Bridging Plan impassioned me to stand, creating a contested election, allowing parishioners' voices to be heard within Grouville's community and across our island. I describe my business style as professional, caring leadership. I intend to be a Connetable for the whole parish, listening to all voices. Grouville parishioners tell me that they want to collaborate through specialised working groups and larger parish assembly discussions. They want to stop the exodus of younger people. They want to keep Grouville rural, preserving and protecting Grouville's wetlands through innovative carbon offset schemes. But they also want homes for young people to get on the housing ladder and encourage our young professional families back to the island. We need to look after the Jersey person. Grouville parishioners want a population policy that does this, but they don't want to prevent economic growth. Parishioners want skills developed on island, making Jersey self-sufficient, led by the Jersey person. Parishioners are concerned about the looming food and cost of living crises, and we must support our farmers and fishermen. A few parishioners talk about self-sufficient electricity supplies through tidal power. Many older people feel forgotten about and the disabled disenfranchised. Parishioners want efficient and effective parish and government expenditure, in particular affordability of £200 million growth in public expenditure and the £800 million hospital budget. The speed of vehicles, accident black spots, minor roads are not safe for wheelchairs, walkers and cyclists are real issues. Parishioners want more cycle tracks, safer routes to schools, work and shops, and by learning and growing together, we'll progress through these times of crises. We'll thrive by harnessing skills within the parish, enriching our social, environmental and economic capital. Please entrust me with your vote on the 22nd of June.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah, and not bad on time either. We'll go to Simon Crowcroft next. Simon, your 2 minutes of yourself and the manifesto.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Simon Crowcroft. I'm standing for re-election as Constable of St Helier. You know, I feel sorry for the people who say they never go into town. You only have to look at today's JEP and St Helier's bouncing back headline. I think St Helier is doing incredibly well given the global pressures on our economy. We're seeing significant private sector investment in refurbishing old buildings like Hammonds and Begans, the stunning transformation of the former BHS, bidding wars for Topshop and Burton's, whose premises lie empty across Britain. Les Sablons at Charing Cross is going to bring new activity into the heart of town, while the new government HQ will see thousands of civil servants enjoying the wealth of social opportunities our town offers. And I'm pleased to play a small part in cutting some of the red tape that besets new businesses, supporting the development of the new co-op and the Pitt Street makeover, encouraging new alfresco areas for places like Vinifera, the Watchmaker and Colmar. Events are a key part of my vision for town. I launched the first ever St Patrick's Day parade through St Helier in March, and with my town centre team, I'm seeking a festival atmosphere to drive footfall and increase spend in our amazing range of retail and hospitality venues. Last evening, I was at Government House for the launch of the new Darrell Public Art project, the Tortoise Takeover. I can't wait to see these around town with families doing shelfies. An equivalent project in Manchester contributed £30 million to that city's economy. But I want to do more for business. I want to make it easier for delivery and service companies to carry out their work in town with a new approach to monitoring unloading bays. I want to persuade the states to increase and incentivize shopper parking, expand the shop mobility scheme, and make a financial contribution to regeneration. I'm working closely with the Honour and States Police as we seek to make towns safer at all times of day and tackle antisocial behaviour and littering. I want to play my part in promoting the central markets and outlying but important trading areas like Columbury. And I know the rates you pay are only a small part of your outgoings, but I'm proud to have kept St Helier's parish rate unchanged for 8 years. And subject to the ratepayers' approval in 3 weeks' time, I will be proposing a 9th year rates freeze, in spite of the inflationary pressures which affect the parish as they do the business community. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Sarah, for your 2 minutes worths, both of exactly the same time, which is good. Let's go from that to just talking about some of the subjects. Now, it is noticeable, of course, that there is such a difference between St Helier and Grouville. They have different needs and different wants, and it's going to be very difficult to combine both of those within this. But I think for chamber members, they do look at those questions that businesses might well ask and say, what could you do for that? You would, if elected, be a member of the States Assembly. So you would be one of those 49 votes. So I just think that it's really important that we get to finding out which way you would support and how you would help. And of course, touch on the needs of your particular parish. Let's talk first of all about one of the clear and present issues that we have at the moment, which is the issue of recruitment. There are businesses right across the island who just cannot get people to work in their businesses in order to service their business, in order to make money, in order to trade. And if they can trade, they can't trade for every day, and there are limits on what they can do. So how do we help them? It, of course, is linked to housing and, of course, linked also to population. So we'll go into those areas as well. But recruitment, Simon, first I'm going to come to you on this, and you won't be immune to any of this in St Helier. Probably the peak of where the crisis is in retail, particularly. There are that many situations vacant up in shop windows now. It's almost every other one. So how do we solve this problem? How do we make it easier for people to recruit?
Thanks for the question, Murray. I mean, clearly this is a global problem. There are certainly European-wide that people are struggling to find staff, and we know the reasons. Brexit principally has made it much more difficult for Jersey to attract European workers. It's been incredibly unhelpful, as of course has the pandemic. And a lot of people have sort of reset their approach to life and have changed what they want to do. We have these extra pressures on us in Jersey around the difficulty of finding accommodation for staff, the cost of that, the wage inflation that is meaning that some staff are moving around looking for higher and higher wages from the premises they go to. Having attended the event organised by the Jersey Hospitality Association at the start of the election campaign, it was really interesting to meet a lot of hoteliers, in particular restaurant owners, who are really struggling. I gather there are 50 chefs, for example, currently needed. And I think there is, clearly the government, which is now in Purdah, has been doing a lot of work to try to release more staff into the economy. We're seeing a lot of recruitment coming in now from Africa, and I know that that's working really well, though I have heard that the immigration process is still painfully slow and is also expensive and unnecessarily complex. And one of the first things I pledged to do to the hoteliers I was talking to do from next Thursday, if I am re-elected, is to talk to the new Home Affairs Minister when he or she comes online shortly afterwards, and see if we can find a much simpler way of bringing people in and then of keeping people here. Because I was talking to a restaurateur recently who's having to say goodbye to a highly skilled chef who wants to stay here because that person has reached the end of their contract period and they have to go back to their home country for 3 months before they can come back to Jersey. And that is completely nonsensical. There is, of course, a contrary view out there that people are worried about population. And my view on population has always been that you cannot set a ceiling on the population of Jersey, simply because if you did, given an aging population, given the demographic, that situation of recruitment will get worse and worse. We have to accept that we will need to allow immigrants who can bring their skills and their commitment to the island, but we need to do much more, I think, to make that process simpler and quicker.
Okay, thank you, Simon. A full answer there, and some part solutions to the outlying problem there. Sarah, again, Grouville will not be immune to this, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in hospitality, and you will have no doubt heard from those parishioners that you've spoken to the difficulty of getting people to do jobs. What's your take on the problem, and where do you see any solutions to this with regard to population?
Okay, thank you. Yes, as I've gone round parishioners, obviously I've spoken to farmers and fishermen, and they don't have such a problem because they have regular people coming back, and of course they have their own accommodation, so they don't see a problem in recruitment. When I speak to, there are obviously some parishioners who do have businesses in St Helier and hospitality, and they are finding they're struggling. And they would be the people that would say, please don't support a population policy, whilst other parishioners will be saying, please support a population policy. So obviously there's something that needs thrashing out there. The overriding principle, I think, has to be that Jersey needs to learn to become self-sufficient and sustainable. And those are the two kind of principles that, long-term principles that we need to be moving towards. And we need to be looking after the Jersey person primarily. There have been some skillful use of outsourcing of financial services. And there may be some other ways of releasing the pressure within the island, I guess. The overriding message is, please can we look after the Jersey person? Please can we upskill the Jersey person so that they get the jobs? Please can we have the skills and the leadership skills in order for the Jersey person to lead Jersey? I know that's slightly different, but it's a slightly different take, but I think it gives a round whole picture. Yeah,
it was quite interesting, the noticeable difference there. There are some common ground areas, and I accept those. And I just want to, Sarah, I'm going to come back to you first. Are there enough of the Jersey person to be able to fill those gaps, or are they? And the second question to that is, there is a lot of and I use the inverted commas, the Jersey person that has drained away from the island.
Yeah.
That were born here, went to university, never came back, or if they did come back, came back when they were married with kids and they wanted to settle down a little bit, sometimes, but not always. And people are leaving all the time. So I just wonder, we need to arrest that as well, don't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the census has shown that we are losing the Jersey people. And it's dreadful. It's a terrible shame, and that's largely around the housing situation. People feel that they'll not get their foot on the housing ladder. And you're right. There are plenty of people I've spoken to who say they have young professional. Their children are professionally qualified in the UK or Europe or elsewhere around the globe, and they ideally want to come back to the island, but there's exactly the same problem. Actually, our salaries have come down, and they just couldn't afford to get onto the housing ladder. And so very much housing is right up there. We need to be addressing affordable housing and not box flats, proper affordable housing for families that people can stay in and have families in.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Housing, it'll be one of your pet subjects, really. St Helier shoulder its fair share of the burden in terms of housing. Do we need to build up, or should we be building out? leading question, considering we have a potential Connetable of Grouville there. I don't want to start a fight even before the post, but
yeah, I mean, I would not use the word burden about housing. I think St Helier has a responsibility and an opportunity here in providing accommodation. Certainly when I took office, there was talk about other parishes having to take their fair share of the burden of housing. And I think that's wrong on a number of grounds. First of all, it's completely unsustainable environmentally, because if we don't build more units in St Helier, we're going to have to build them in Grouville and other parishes. And as a person who likes to get out of town to enjoy the beautiful island that we've kept beautiful and we've kept largely green, I want to be able to enjoy a rural Grouville. I want to be able to enjoy the coastline of Jersey and not see it, dotted with ribbon development, as has happened, sadly, in our sister island. But the other point I think is that people are good for town. Towns work better if more people choose to live in them. And I think what we are seeing, certainly in recent years, with some of the better flatted developments, with more open space provided around them, with bigger flats, with more ancillary rooms, so that the families can, small families I accept, but so that those families can spread out. We're seeing people really wake up to the opportunities that living in St Helier has. And to come back to the sustainability argument, clearly if more people are living in town, they're not driving into school and work from Grouville and St Juan because they're already in town. So they're walking to work and school or cycling. So that, again, that's good for the environment. It's good for the island's climate change goals if people dwell in the main town. So I don't really see a problem in St Helier building more units. Some of them are going to have to go up. Otherwise, of course, if you have a bigger footprint, then you take up more land. And I do think there's a case for really well-designed flats that people actually want to live in, which have a spare room for a hobby or a business to be run in, which have a communal gym, and all kinds of things that we are beginning to see now certainly in other towns and cities.
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of, and I'm going to go back to Grouville on this, in terms of the housing situation in Grouville, it very much is a country parish, and nobody is suggesting for 1 minute that it should start a building program that will eat into the green space there. However, there will be needs from the parish to provide some housing in Grouville. And is that something that you've heard from the doorsteps when you've been canvassing, Sarah?
Oh, certainly. And everybody agrees that that if we can provide housing, then we should provide housing. There are plenty of people who are born in Grouville or the east of the island that would like to have some affordable housing. That said, we won't be building on wetlands. That was a decision that was made through the island bridging plan. That's just inappropriate, and we need green fields for food production. We need our wetlands as carbon sinks, and also for migratory birds through the winter. If there is land, and we can set out and look. There might be some brownfield sites. There may be some appropriate sites that we can build on, and we must be prioritising affordable housing for our younger people, for our returning professionals, and moving away from luxury developments on the small pieces of land in Grouville.
In terms of recruiting and having accommodation, and I use the word very loosely, worker accommodation, in terms of having accommodation that you can put the workforce that we inevitably are going to need to come in to cover some of the gaps that we talked about before in recruitment. No matter how hard we try to grow our own and to upskill everyone, we're still going to need people to come in. Where are we going to put them, and how do we square that circle? The lodging houses aren't there anymore. They've been developed already. We have not got the amount of hotels that we had before who would provide their own hotel accommodation for their own workers. And so the hospitality restaurants and the retail areas and the building works companies don't have anywhere to put anyone. Should we be looking at that as a project to supply? Simon, what do you think about accommodation for workers?
Yeah, this matter was debated by the states in probably it's the last sitting before the recess, and there was a move by one state's member to fast track the provision of almost dormitory accommodation for new workers, and that didn't sit well with the Assembly. But I think the principle is right, and I've certainly spoken to a number of developers recently who are they're in the process of developing flats, and they're more or less saying, look, we're quite happy to develop accommodation for staff if that's what government wants. So I think there needs to be a dialogue between the new housing minister and some of these developers as soon as they're in post next month, because I think there are people in the business of providing accommodation who will provide not dormitories, but flats that are fit for people to live in. And I think the other really interesting development I'm aware of, and it's actually been driven by our Polish honorary consul, is looking at some of the new technology that's available in Europe for building quicker, for building more sustainably, and actually for building cheaper. You know, people in Poland are not building by pouring concrete and bringing in thousands of breeze blocks. They're looking at low carbon approaches to building. And interestingly, we had some of us have been up to Jersey Hemp in recent weeks to see what they're doing, and they've come up with, or they want to develop a form of using hemp to make what I call breeze blocks, and this is completely sustainable. It locks in the carbon. The cost will be much less, and so I think we are on the threshold of being able to build more cheaply and to build more quickly, as long as the planning system moves quickly as well. And of course, we all know how slow planning can be, even if we've just tried to get a conservatory approved. We need a new planning minister who's going to really get the message that we need to build in a new way that is more sustainable, that is quicker, and that is more affordable.
Thank you, Simon. I'm going to come back to you, Sarah, on that, just to recap on that. In terms of accommodation for workers, different needs for different types of workers, I would suggest in the majority in Grouville, although of course you do have your share of hotels and other hospitality there as well. So again, do you align yourself with Simon in terms of we need to look at recruitment, accommodation, housing accommodation?
Well, certainly there are a few construction business owners within the parish of Grouville, and that they have talked to me about this need for this dormitory style accommodation, and if you can get the solution that Simon's talking about is superb. If it's quick, if it's got a low carbon footprint, hempcrete, fabulous. If they're starting to make that, great. He's starting to, when we start to think in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, suddenly everybody starts to think more innovatively. So if we're getting there, and if you've got, if you can find the sites for this sort of accommodation that can come up quickly, and that it's fit for human consumption, if you like, so that they're not being degraded in any way, then that has to be a good way forward and to be supported.
Okay, fine. Let's change tack ever so slightly. I want to talk about the parishes, and were it so easy that I would have the Connetable elects, or the candidates for, should I say St Mary's and St Lawrence and Grouville would be slightly easier, because there is a bit of chalk and cheese here. But I just wondered what the burning issues are within your own parishes. You're coming close to the election now. You've had time to get round the parishes and get round and talk to people in businesses and talk to those on the doorstep as well. And what are the burning issues that they say, this is what you need to be doing? And I just wonder what your take is on those. Sarah, I'm going to come to you first on this. What are the people of Grouville telling you they want?
Well, it always starts with housing. And affordable housing and the cost of living crisis. So it always starts, and we've been talking about housing, so I kind of move on from that, I think. The next thing that they talk about is electoral reform. because I start with, I want to be your voice, the collective voice in the States Assembly, and reinvigorating democratic processes. So that immediately turns them on to electoral reform, and they're all very angry about having and want to be able to appoint the very best. And they feel like they're being hindered.
We have had a little bit of a freeze there, Sarah, and I'm not sure whether that's our chamber Wi-Fi or yours, but we've got a little bit of a freeze on at the moment.
It's out in the sticks.
Yeah, well, you see, it could be careful what you say about Grouville now, Simon. It was all going so well. It was all going swimmingly well up until that point. However, Sarah, if you can hear us, you are frozen on screen at the moment, and we will try and unfreeze you in some way. I think Sarah's going to come back in just a second. Simon, let's go to you. What are you hearing on the doorsteps?
Well, if I could pick just 3 of the many issues that are coming up, people in St Helier are really concerned about the environment, and that's why the climate change emergency that Deputy Ward brought to the Parish Assembly was supported, and of course it was afterwards taken to the States and supported by government. But they are concerned about environment, and that's why we do have a fortnightly recyclable collection. They like that, but I think they want more recycling. They want to be able to, for example, as they do in many places in Europe now, put so much more out for recycling than they do. At the moment, it's just paper, card, plastic and tins. A lot of places now are composting food waste and garden waste, so that the amount of stuff left over or residual waste left in your bin is really quite small. Also on the environment, St Helier people are really concerned about the protection of our green fields. We don't want urban sprawl out into the countryside, and it was good that the Bridging Island Plan debate saw the protection of at least 4 out of the 5 fields that were slated for development. And they want to see our parks protected and extended. And as members of Chamber will know, I've been pushing for the extension of the Millennium Town Park. We have an opportunity to double it in size. That's certainly the vision of Andiam Homes. Transport, of course, is always a key issue that comes up. It comes up across the island, but it's particularly an important issue in St Helier, because all roads lead to St Helier. And so a lot of my constituents live on the side of very busy roads, and even though electric cars are coming on stream very quickly, there's still an awful lot of pollution affecting their lives, and they want to see the island moving to zero emission transport much faster. They want to see government providing the safe walking and cycling routes that we've been calling for, and certainly the parish of St Helier has been asking successive ministers for infrastructure, for a cycling strategy, because all the current ministers appear to be able to do is to put cycle racks everywhere. And in fact, St Helier is now awash with cycle racks, and yet we still don't have safe cycling routes that would link us with, for example, Sarah's constituents coming in from Grouville. It's very difficult once you get to town on a bicycle to actually cycle safely and responsibly around the town. And that really needs to be addressed by the next government. And the last thing I would mention is the cost of living. It's a real problem out there. We're facing this, of course, not on our own, but with really, it's a global issue, particularly with the war in Ukraine. But as I mentioned in my opening speech, the parish is doing all it can to help by freezing the parish rates. So we want to reduce that particular burden on parishioners, so they have a little bit more money to spend on the essentials.
Okay, thank you for that. Whilst we're waiting for Sarah to rejoin us, and we hope she does, and we don't know what technical difficulties have gone on there, but we hope that we see a return of Sarah. Whilst not that we're bored with you already, Simon, but just so I can be as equal as I possibly can. Just a couple of things that you were talking about there. You were talking about cycle routes, and now it's not easy to get in. Let me put the reverse to you. There will be some, and there will be certainly notable market traders who will say it's not easy to go cycle back home with your groceries on your bike. And at the end of the day, town is the retail centre. It's the only retail centre we've got. And in fact, there are restrictions on moving retail out of St Helier. So we still need to get cars in and out of town, and we still need to get shoppers in and out of town to do their shopping. And, you know, you can go and buy your weekly groceries, but you're not going to be able to put them on the back of a bike.
Well, I mean, I would disagree with that. I think particularly with the arrival of electric bikes, we're seeing that it is possible to cycle home with quite a lot of stuff. And we're beginning to see now very common in the UK, but we're beginning to see people with electric, power assisted bikes who are carrying quite a lot. There are even delivery companies now which are finding it cheaper and easier to deliver in London using cycle carriers, which carry stuff. But I do accept your point, and I'm always at pains to emphasize, particularly when I talk to business leaders, that just because I use a bike for some of my journeys doesn't make me anti-car. I mean, I have to confess I have several cars and 2 motorbikes, and there are many journeys for which the car is the best form of transport. And that's why in my opening words, I said the government really needs to provide more shopper parking. It is quite ridiculous that Minden Place car park is full every evening at 6 o'clock. How are people supposed to go to the arts centre? How are they supposed to go for a restaurant meal when there is nowhere to park? And I'm convinced that we actually need a new shopper car park. And I think we should be thinking about one, instead of when these hotels coming down, just building more flats. I think we should be saying, why not have a new shopper car park on the Ring Road? That was always going to happen when the Jersey Brewery site was developed, but now it's being developed without significant shopper car parking. And even when Ann Court comes back on stream, which we hope will be next year, there's still, I think, will be a need for shopper parking to really sustain the economy of the town.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you some point later and talk about charging units, because there are a dearth of those, even if you have got an electric car, and also electric scooters, which are extremely easy and a great deal of fun to use. The only time I've used them is when I've been comparing the Battle of Flowers, but you can whip up and down the avenue quite a few times in one of those. So let's go back. Sarah, welcome back. Good to have you with us. I'm so pleased you joined us again, because you were frozen in not your best pose, and I'm delighted that you're back. Let's talk. You were right in the middle of talking about electoral reform and being the voice of that parish. When we say electoral reform, we've undergone quite a lot. In fact, this election is a result of it. Do the constituencies work for you, or do you think we've got Connetables representing the parish? Why haven't we got island-wide mandates? It's been a big talking point of this election. And have you had that from the Grouville residents?
Oh, absolutely. 95% of parishioners that I talk to want the island-wide mandate back. They want the Connetables to stay in the States Assembly. They understand the importance of the Connetable being the voice of the community, actually they understand the importance of having a strong Connetable within the States Assembly. And I think that's just something that that is coming to the forefront of their minds. But island-wide mandate is something that they want. They're not specifying that what that is, whether it's a deputy that's an island-wide mandate, or whether it's a senator coming, or reverting back. I don't think we can go back. We've got to keep moving forward, don't we? So how that looks isn't clear, but certainly island-wide mandate they definitely want back.
Okay, Simon, do you have the same sense of are you going to miss senators? If you were re-elected, this would be your first time in the States where there wouldn't be senators there. Very different looking States Assembly.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the role of the senator was always going to be in trouble once the advantage of being a senator was eroded. It used to be a 6-year term of office. Then it became the same as a deputy. And so there was no longer that advantage for running for senator. And maybe that's something that should be considered, because there needs to be some advantage in being a senator. I think the other problem that beset the senators was that people elected on an island-wide mandate were not getting the top jobs. So you could be elected as a senator, but it didn't mean, for example, you'd be the president of the health committee or minister of health, as it now is. And so people began to ask what was the point of having a senatorial election if it didn't lead to, for example, the chief minister always having to be a senator. So it's interesting. I mean, I've certainly come round to the view that if Guernsey can make it work, then we can. And Guernsey have made the island-wide election work. So everybody votes for a certain number of members to be in the assembly. And that seems to me to work. The issue is around the constables, and it's probably no secret to members who've been around for a while to know that when we had a referendum on the automatic right of the constable to sit in the States, I was the only one of the constables who disagreed with that. And in fact, I joined the other group who said that the constable should stand for election as a member of the legislature on equal terms with the other deputies. So my preferred system would be an election for constable 2 weeks ahead of the general election. The other advantage of that is it would mean that anyone who would like to try to take over the constable's job wouldn't need to give up their role as deputy. And that's in fact what happened when I became constable. In those days, constables were elected at different times. So you could run for constable. Well, and if you weren't successful, as happened with me after my first try, then you remained a deputy and you could have another go at it another time. I think that's a much better system, because surely the best source of constables coming up, it's no longer in the honorary police, it's actually in the benches of the deputies.
Of course, you've got an array of deputies, more than you've ever had now in St Helier, under the voice of electoral representation and having the right number of representation for the right number of population. Were that the case, there'd probably about 6 Connetables, wouldn't there, in St Helier?
Well, I think it's a good point. When the Constable of St Mary votes, he or she represents 1,800 people. When I vote on an important matter affecting my constituents, it's 18,000 people. So you could argue that people who live in St Mary have more power when it comes to politics than people living in St Helier. That is the problem with allowing constables to have equal votes, given that they have vastly differing electoral mandates.
I can see electoral colleges and numbers of votes coming into play here. It could get even more complicated than it is at the moment, but it's an interesting one. In the main, are you both saying that you would prefer to see senators than not?
I don't think they should be called senators. Occasionally you hear from Jersey senators who've been bumped up to first class on their traveling because people mistake them for American-style senators. I prefer the clothier terminology, which is MSJ, or Member of the States of Jersey, and that puts us on an equal footing with members of the Scottish Assembly and the Welsh Assembly, who are not looking for grandiose titles. They're simply members of the Welsh Assembly or members of the Scottish Parliament. So I think MSJ would be fine. I think we could all do that. Of course, one other solution with the constables and the inequality of the voting involved would be to put the constables in an upper house. So you could, for example, have a second chamber where the constables would sit. And then you're moving towards a situation in the United States where you have the two houses, and every state, however big, still has 2 representatives representing in one house, whereas the other house is made up of people who are based on population.
Oh, Sarah, you must have your say on this. Sorry.
Yeah, it's quite complicated. I'm going to have to think an awful lot about that, Simon. So my view is, yes, I would support the island-wide mandate and the reintroduction of the island-wide mandate. However, whatever name, whatever, and the format, I clearly haven't thought enough about, because Simon's got some great ideas around that. But yeah, definitely island-wide mandate back. And there is one more thing I want to say, actually, about this electoral reform before we move on, is that Grouville and St Martin have less representatives in their constituency than other constituencies, at least 1, if not 2, less votes. That makes the role of Connetable and deputy within that district constituency really important. We're going to have strong candidates who can represent and understand the business within the States Assembly to represent the people appropriately.
Okay, we've skirted around retail and agriculture and farming. Tourism is a sector which touches so many other people in what it provides, from hotels to the visitor numbers, to the spend of GST, and to the air routes that we all enjoy. So the tourism industry is under a great deal of pressure, having had 2 years of virtually nothing to bouncing back to a point where it can't manage the demand that it's got. And in some cases, in Jersey's case, not having enough hotel beds in order to sell that. So there are some concerns there. Are there things that you would do and support in the tourism industry to get that tourism industry back to where it might be? Sarah, I can come to you first on this if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll be brief on it. Yeah, I mean, we have a beautiful island and stunning, and when visitors come, they cannot believe how stunningly beautiful it is, and we must capitalize on that. I did have a few parishioners talking about specialized events and golfing events, well-being events, that we should be doing more of that and really taking advantage of our beautiful island. So yes, more investment in tourism, and it is to be supported.
Very good. Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. It's a really important question. I've said for quite a while now that I think Jersey needs a tourism minister. When I joined the States, we had we used to refer to Johnny Blue Eyes, or John Rothwell, who frequently stood up on the States and banged the drum for the tourism industry, and as did the late Dick Shenton as well. And I think not having a spokesperson for this crucial industry in the States is a shame, because I don't think the economic development minister with the best will in the world can be representing both finance and tourism, or finance and agriculture and tourism, because tourism inevitably, I think, gets left out. I'd also like to see a tourism hotel in Jersey. I was talking to a hotelier who is in the process of leaving the industry, and I actually asked him, how much was the hotel on the market for? Because I think not everyone agrees with sort of state intervention in this, but if you're going to have a situation where you have a training hotel where local young people are encouraged to go into hospitality and they can actually train locally in a tourism hotel, I think that'll be a fantastic thing for the states to do. And given the sort of sums involved, I think we could afford to do it. And it would really be a shot in the arm for tourism. It would be creating local people who could go into work in the hospitality industry. I'm pleased with what Sarah said about all the reasons people come to Jersey. There are lots of new things people are doing. I think heritage is really important, and that's why I'm really glad that Elizabeth Castle is sort of getting the Montorgueil treatment. We are incredibly lucky in a small island to have 3, if not 4, castles for our heritage visitors to look at. And heritage, we know from the Isle of Man, comparison with them is one of the main drivers for tourism now. We need to continue to invest in heritage and more heritage lets. I think those are wonderful ideas, and they also help address the need for accommodation in the tourism sector. There's obviously an opportunity to have far more accommodation for tourists at Elizabeth Castle. I mean, in bygone days, there'd be whole armies living there. And I would certainly like to see that expanded. And finally, I think event-led tourism remains a really important draw for Jersey. And actually for St Helier, we've supported the International Motoring Festival for certainly for the 20 years I've been in office. And lots of people come to Jersey because it's still a place where to own a classic car is not in some way looked down on. And people just love to go to People's Park and see the lines of classic cars and to see a bit of racing on public roads. So the more event-led tourism I think we can move ahead on, the better it'll be for tourism.
Okay, we're going to run out of time very shortly. Before we do, Sarah, you did mention cost of living as one of those things that people were really talking to you about, and I'm sure they are in every parish. There's been a lot of talk recently, and it's probably been driven as much by the media and as people like us as anybody else. But in terms of GST and GST on food, where do we go on that? Because, you know, there have been calls to take GST off food because it's a basic essential, and it's an essential that we shouldn't be putting a tax on. It's bound to come up in the next States Assembly. I'll be surprised if it doesn't in the next 4 years. So where would you stand on taking GST off food?
I would support GST being removed from food, as in other jurisdictions. Obviously, there'd be a financial consequence of that, and that needs to be looked at carefully. And possibly, you know, swapping that for some luxury GST on some luxury goods. But I would definitely support the reduction of GST or removal of GST on food. I think we're going to be struggling. We're going to be moving into struggle for many people in the next 4 years.
Simon, GST and food, not a new subject.
Yeah, I mean, I took a petition to the States many years ago to stop the introduction of GST. I didn't believe it was necessary. When I started out in the States, I was a critic of overspending by the States, and actually I still am. I've just stopped banging on about it because my criticism has tended to fall on deaf ears on both sides of the political spectrum. Those, the establishment, if you like, who claim that they're not wasting money, and on the left, the politicians who want to spend more money and put up taxes. So, you know, I come from the system in the parish where I have to present my accounts every year to a group of ratepayers. And when I started, they were a large group of angry ratepayers. And so I know what it means to cut budgets and to, you know, to suit your, to cut your cloth, your coat to suit your cloth. And I think that the government should take a leaf out of the parish's books and start to really examine their spending. So before I, you know, get involved in a debate about taking GST off food, and incidentally, I would say, what about books and newspapers? I mean, you know, why should we pay GST on books? Nobody else does. I think the question has to be, you know, why do we still depend on a goods and services tax that raises £100 million for the government to waste? In the hustings on Monday evening, I likened it to the spend local card that they generously gave us all to spend £100. The only difference is that the government's spend local card is mainly spent, as far as I can see, on non-local things, and it's not £100; it's £100 million. So as I say, I think there are questions to be asked about what the government spends money on, and we just have to be careful that we don't take so many things off GST that the things that are left in the basket for GST become, you know, out of reach of the people we've been talking about, like the tourists.
Final question, and it's related to your election campaigns, and they will differ and I mean this in the nicest possible way, in your experience of running election campaigns, not in your experience of life at all. And I'll start actually with you, Sarah, on this. What have been the things that you've been either surprised by or you've learned by in this election campaign? Because we're coming to the last few days now before people start voting, and of course people can of course vote at St Paul's. It's 9 until 5, I think, except for a Friday when it's 8:30 until 5, except for a Friday when it's 4:30. So what have you learned, and what are the surprises that you've discovered?
Well, it's really intense. It's definitely very intense, especially since it's a contested election, and that's obviously a really good thing. And parishioners are delighted to see people knocking on their doors, and that's one of the really nice things actually, is that they're so welcoming, and so many of them are you know, wanting change. I suspect we're going to see, because it's a contested election, and because many people want change, I think we're going to see a lot more people out. In fact, I know many people have already been pre-polling and have been voting by mail. So I think that's been a big step forward. Yeah, it's the openness of the welcoming that I've received from parishioners, and that keeps you going, because it's really tiring. It's really very tiring. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a rewarding and enriching, a rewarding and enriching experience.
Thank you, Sarah. Simon, a slightly different question for you, because you'll have done this before a few times. What's the changes that you've noticed? What has it changed in terms of some things will remain the same? It's another election campaign. I'll get the rosette out and I'll go and talk to people. So there's a formula, if you like, but I would imagine that it's changed slightly. The emphasis has changed. The way you do it has changed.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly more on social media, and I'm having to sort of follow my kids' footsteps and learn how to do things like LinkedIn and you know, Instagram, although I believe you have to call it Insta rather than Instagram. Although I've always been fairly keen on Twitter because I quite like the brevity of it, but I'm trying now to work on the different social media platforms to get my message across. And obviously a lot more emails. People are sending emails with really quite detailed questions that require detailed answers. So there's a lot more online work involved. And of course that eats into the time. You've got to be out there in a parish like St Helier, which is, you know, really huge. It's impossible for me to personally knock on every door. And I just hope that people will have all received my election leaflet and will know what I basically I've set out what I've done for the last 20 years and what I aim to do, probably not for the next 20, but at least for the next 4. The other thing I've noticed, I think, is that the people, you know, there are people who are really worried about their lives, their cost of living, the pressures they're under in terms of quality of life issues living in St Helier. But I've also been really pleasantly surprised to find how many people are looking beyond themselves, beyond the island, and their concerns relate to the war in Ukraine, and they're really pleased that Jersey and the parish is doing work on that to try and alleviate the problems in Ukraine. So I think, as I say, there are these different people you meet with different responses to life.
That's because I muted myself. Simon, thank you. I wish you and Mark Le Chevalier, who is the other candidate for St Helier, the very best. And whoever is successful in that, we look forward to working at Chamber of Commerce with the new Connetables of St Helier, be they new or the existing. Sarah, thank you very much indeed. I wish you and Mark Labby, who is the other candidate in Grouville, the very best wishes from Chamber with your election campaigns. We again look forward to working with the Connetables of Grouville at Chamber of Commerce in the way forward. And of course, you both get to not only if you are elected, sit in the States Assembly, run your parishes, but have the joy of the Committee de Connetables, which is an exciting group for people to go and sit in front of. I know, I've done it. It's very good to speak to you both. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. I hope it's been as comfortable for you as it has been for me, and we wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.